Connecting.
I'm wondering.
Can you help me? You're listening to the Musicians Help Desk podcast, brought to you by the Music District. On this week's edition of the Musicians Help Desk, we sit down with Anna Morsett, frontwoman and songwriter for Denver indie rock band The Still Tide. You're listening to her now. Anna's done it all, toured nationally and internationally as a band leader, bandmate, and guitar tech. She dives deep into the phone-silenced nights where she germinates songs over hours of exploration, and then finishes our conversation with a word about the pre-production process that gives her songs, all grown up now, the best shot at survival beyond the studio. Along the way, we learn how she integrates seamlessly as a support player, how and why she documents every rehearsal, and how she finds time to keep the fire of connection between her music and her fans foremost. Today we're coming at you via the Red Rehearsal Room of the Music District. I'm your host, Alicia, and I'm here with my co-host, Aaron Roberts.
Hello.
And very special guest, Anna Morsett of Denver indie rock band, The Still Tide.
Hello.
Do you identify as an indie rock band?
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is like, I feel like I say that as when I'm describing the band, I'm like, I know this is a terribly vague way to describe anything, but yes, we're indie rock, and people are like, interesting, cool, and that's where that ends.
Alicia and I had a conversation before you came, and Alicia asked me, do you think Anna would identify as an indie rock band? Yes, I do.
I think so.
So I'm glad we're not totally wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know what else I would really call it. I think that like is a big bucket term that I can see myself in that bucket.
Don't fall too deep into the bucket.
Don't
drown in the indie rock bucket.
Do you have like a better like 2-line elevator description of the Still Tide?
I used to say indie salt rock for a long time, which I just thought was funny. But then someone like in a like booking email or at some point was like, I really like that you said salt rock. And I was like, it was a joke, but I love that you enjoy that.
I love salt rocks.
I like salt rocks too. I have one of those Himalayan salt lamps at home, and my kids like to lick it. They're like horses in the sun.
I never even thought about licking.
I didn't.
Well, I tried. It's very salty.
You got to see what your kids are into. You got to know. Well, I mean, they seem
Is there
to
something
enjoy it.
behind this? Okay.
Okay, this is going great. So Anna spent a week with us in residency with her band, The Still Tide, back in June, writing and pre-producing tunes for their next album. We actually had to reschedule our podcast for a later date because Anna hosted such a mind-blowingly great, hands-on, question-fueled workshop on guitar maintenance here at the Music District, and we basically couldn't get the group of people who attended to leave. Aaron and I were partly to blame for this, and I'm going to spend this interview basically trying not to ask you follow-up questions from that. I did some adjustments on my guitar.
Ooh.
I've been changing strings like a pro.
Hell yeah.
And
What if my
it's been
guitar
so
ended
great.
up in your house? Would you not know it was mine and
Just
accidental guitar change?
I would change your strings just because I'm
Okay.
like into it now. It used to be something I dreaded, and now I'm like, here, hand that to me.
I love that. That's how I
Pass
feel
it
about
over.
changing strings. It's like very zen.
Yeah.
Feels like something becomes right in the world every time I change
Gosh.
strings.
And you were like, functional is beautiful.
I'm gonna help you
And
all
I
with
say
your
that to
with your
myself.
musical mindfulness and insert a guitar into your hands. All right, Anna. One of the things I admire about you most is that you have this really multifaceted music career. You front your own band, Still Tide. You play bass and guitar in other projects. In full disclosure, one of those bands is with me, but also you've played with Brent Cole's Arc Life These United States, and then you have this amazing supporting career as a guitar tech, supporting artists like Keki King, Devil Makes Three, and Tallest Man on Earth. You obviously have a really busy, demanding schedule. What do you have to do now to make room in your life for your own project for Still Tide?
Oh, that's been maybe the biggest challenge of anything over the last, I mean, it's funny, I just sent my resume over to someone today, and then when you really see everything on paper, suddenly you're like, oh, I've been at this for a while. Like, oh. But that has been the struggle, and trying to keep a balance, especially when you're working for bands that are on a really tight record cycle and schedule, because those, you could be on tour for a few years if you're not like really mindful of where you're spending your time.
And you're talking both as a supporting artist, as a bass player and guitar player, and as a guitar tech?
Oh, sure. Actually, I should clarify that. I was just thinking about, like, I swung in kind of to finish off what had been like a 2-year record cycle for this one specific band. And they'd been like literally on the road for at least a year and a half by the time I joined in, which is just kind of, it was amazing and such a wonderful experience, but you know, that's a lot of time. So trying to find that balance between playing music, making music, writing music, which is very isolated and solitary and insular, to then like being on the road as a tech, where your days as a tech on those kind of tours are so long that like the idea, I used to have this like grand vision of tour, like that you would be able to like, you know, wake up and read or write in the morning and have some solo time, and that is not the case. Now that kind of I've leveled up in that world, and the days are, you know, you start, load-in starts at noon, and then you're done at like 2 in the morning. And maybe you have a dinner break. And I love it. I love all of that, but it's like there's no time to really be the crafting, creative person that I am at home. So all that to say, it is a real challenge. And so now I've kind of like scaled back who I've worked for, which was, you know, you're flattered by getting a lot of job offers, and it feels really good. And I'm at a point now where I have a good reputation and I get offered stuff. And it's one of the first times over the last like year or so where I've been like, no.
Is that scary?
It was
turn
at
down
first.
Work?
Right, because then you're like, well, if I say no now, when is that ever going to come back? And that is often the case and there have been there was a few bands that offered me jobs and I just logistically couldn't take it at the time, and I said no. And I remember one band that then blew up so significantly, but I remember in this email he was like, well, that's a real bummer, but we'll keep you in mind. But he said that, and I was like, you have no idea, man, it is a real bummer. And then I watched them just like explode, and I was like, oh. But so it is scary, but
then you have to face the reality. If that were to be even more of a full-time job, where would Still Tide lay or lie?
Yeah.
What is the proper grammar with that?
Laid.
Where would Still Tide done laid with that? But that's something you have to consider.
Yeah, and I think at some point, like the older I've become and the more that like I can't not do that. I can't not do that. Like that feeling, and I'm sure you guys have the same feeling, like those musical pursuits and the music that's inside you is lifelong, and if you ignore it, I think later you'll come back to it and resent that you neglected it for so long. And it's funny, I have this like journal entry that I was reading, because I write down everything in notebooks, and it's just like a big garden of things that I'll pluck from later as I'm songwriting. And I was rereading a passage from like 5 years ago where I was like, I think I'm just too old to do this anymore. And I was like, oh my God. You were like 29, 28. And I was like, oh, geez. Yeah, super melodramatic. Probably just full of self-doubt like everyone. That roller coaster of like, I can do this. And then like, oh my God, what was I thinking? But so I started saying no. And that felt really good, but it was really scary. And saying no, even, I think, you can look around that tech world and see people that were really involved in music and then kind of leaned into tech life more than they did music life. And I think there is kind of some slivers of regret there that you can see in people that went fully into tech life, because you're still a creative person on the inside. So,
and watching other people do it all day.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So this brings up another question when you're talking about your journals and your notebooks. I've known you for a little while now, and you always have notebooks and writing instruments around. I always know if I need a pen. You're my go-to. But tell me a little bit about when you're home and you're working. We're going to get to your time here at the Music District here in a little bit, but I want to know, like, when you're home, off of your tech tours, off of touring with all these other bands and your own band, what's your process for writing songs, and how do you document what you're doing, and what do you draw inspiration from?
Ooh, those are good questions. I feel like I've very slowly created a system that, and I think I'd always wanted to like have a very functional system, especially with how like strange our lives are. Just even like the way that the time we use is so different, because it's not like you're sitting at a desk 9 to 5 and your hours are so strange. So now I think I have a good process, but I collect everything in notebooks, and there's a lot of like passages. It's not very like, dear diary, today Erin said that my hair looked nice and I was excited. It's more like there are some like significant life events, and that did happen, and I did journal about it for the record. But but I have like, it's like life events that happen and like reflections on whatever's going well or not so well in my life, and then also just a lot of like one-liner collections, like just, and I'm sure you guys do too, like things that'll be like, oh, that could be an interesting chorus, or that's an interesting idea, I'll unpack later. And so I just have these like pages, and there's different markings, and there's like a series of different markings that I have that mean different things for ideas and some stuff that I need to explore or go back to. And then kind of in the chaos of our lives, I'll just keep collecting that on tour or whatever. And then like right now, because we created so much at the Music District, like all these songs came to light that we have like 7 new songs after that week, which is crazy. Yeah, but then it was like a marathon of writing when I got home, because I was like, I got to write all these lyrics. So then it was a process of going back through those now that I have time to really figure out what those songs want to be about. And as you're kind of singing through that, there's like a lot of words that come out that I don't anticipate sometimes. And so sometimes I chase those leads and see if they're worthy, or if not, just like go back through this kind of seed bed that I've created and pluck from it. And it's nice to do that, because you can just have this very like fearless, like just put down every stupid thing, and then when you have that time to rake through, you can be like, oh well, that's a clunker, that's a gem, and then you can like start pulling things that all kind of build towards the same thing. And then other times that's like the long form, and then other times I'll just sit down and be like, I'm feeling a thing, and then it'll just weirdly come out. And I know that, I'm sure you guys have had that too, where it's like just feels like a gift from the universe, where like suddenly the words and the music, it's all happening in one deep, beautiful sweep. And that's those rare gifts.
Have you noticed a difference in like the success of the songs for the songs that you've worked over versus the ones that have just kind of organically come to you? Do you think
that's a great question?
I think one is better, ends up being better?
I think for me, yes. Well, that's interesting, because some people, I think I'm thinking about one song in particular that just kind of like ripped itself out of me. And I know how certain people have been very vocal about that one song and how that touches them. And I feel like that
What song is it?
Oh no, I got nervous. It's Wheels Will Slow, which is the last song on the EP that we just put out in April. And I feel like I've gotten more feedback about that one. And that one was just like there. Like, and I still like, even the tuning that's in, like, I don't know where that came from. Never used it before. Anyway, weird. But, and so people that are really paying attention, I think, love that song. But then like Give Me Time, which I think a broader audience really enjoyed, took so much work and went through so many different variations and cycles, and people really enjoy that song, but for different reasons. So I don't know. That's a really good question. I should kind of keep track of that as we go forward on this record.
Yeah, you should compile some data, and then you can best apply.
Clearly, we didn't give you the parameters, the pre-research that you needed to do for this interview.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'll consider that a fail on our part.
Yeah,
here at the Music District.
Oh man, that is a good question. I'll have to think
so
about
we
that.
do want to dive into more about your experience here at the Music District. We were fortunate enough to get to hang out with you and have some conversations with you while you were here about your songwriting process. And you had mentioned that this was one of the first times that you'd been in a room with your whole band, sort of working on songs in that form. I know that Jake, your guitarist, Jake Miller, has been a longtime collaborator of yours. But what does it mean to develop new material as a band? How does that feel? And what do you think were the elements, like the unique components of the Still Tide currently that made that possible for you?
That's a really good. It was strange to look around that room and realize that that was the first time that was really happening. Like we kind of worked on things over the last few years, but not anything intense like that at all, which is, I think I can get to a certain point with songs and then I really value that like collaborative spirit of everyone. Even just that, like those first moments when you're playing something for the first time with people and those first ideas they have, I think that is such a magical moment. And so often those are the things that in my own private solo stuff are what I chase, are just the things that come out when you're not really, like you don't know where it's going yet. So in that way, I think all those songs really did kind of get finished. Like I'd brought in all these like the little tiny babies and then like brought them to those guys, and then in the joy of like playing together, everyone was like, oh, well, what about this thing here, or like, oh, maybe this thing. And just that moment, I think that I love that, and I wish I could do that all the time, because I think that really does propel even my writing on, because just being able to like I have this weird hook, or I wrote this bass line and I don't know what to do with it, let's figure it out together. I love that. And I think too it really does bond a band together when everyone can have their own input and their like, so in that way alone, I think we just bonded as a group, which is funny because we've been working like really intensely together for years in this band and in Brent's band, like on the road around each other very consistently. So the fact that this was like another level of bonding was really cool. What elements? Yeah, what was the other part of that question?
I have another question leading off that. So when you say you brought like these tiny babies, these tiny seeds of songs, what does that mean? Do you bring musical seeds? Do you bring some musical seeds with some vocal elements or some lyrics, or what exactly do you bring? And I know you said earlier you take songs back and then work on them lyrically. What do you work on as a group? Is it mostly the musical structure and then you murmur over it? And
Yeah.
mumblecore?
Yeah, which was mumblecore. Oh my God, which was hilarious because we'd get through a take and we were multi-tracking all of this stuff which was so helpful too, to just go back and have like a demo immediately of this. But there was a few times where Nate would be like, did you just say pour some soup into my pants, let's whiskey dance? And I was like, it's
Yes.
possible. I think I could have said that.
You're like, keeper?
Yes,
Yes, no?
It is weird though. And then listening back to these demos where I just am like mumbling, I'd say weird things too. And some of them are interesting and maybe I'll keep, but some of them I'm like, what was going through your little mind then?
You probably should take those to a psychologist
I
to
probably should.
find out who you really are.
It's no secret that I should see a therapist, so we'll just bring that in.
Okay, this leads into another question we have for you. I've played a little bit, I've played a little bit with you in Poor Lolo, and looking at your notes, playing with me and seeing your notes for your own band, Still Tide, they're extremely organized, and it'll be like we're done with practice, and hours later you will have edited them down and emailed them to everybody, or if we're trying to sub in a new player, you'll have practice takes from like the last 3 practices, and I mean it's kind of a level of professionalism and a level of organization that a lot of musicians don't have. Is this like something you've come up with on your own? Is this a system that you've devised to stay organized in the midst of all of this chaos and all of these projects?
Yeah. And I think it's been really useful. I think privately, I just have a very poor memory. So it's like the crutch that I lean on very much out of necessity. But it is really great because I think having practice takes, like I do record every practice, I think that's been so valuable that even now, like I know we're going to practice later, so I dutifully brought my little recorder.
Yeah, what's your setup? What's your little recorder?
I just have a little Zoom, which is the same company, H4n Zoom recorder, and I bought it actually because you can use that as an interface, so just for like tracking demos and stuff. But I record everything. The real trick is then like you have to edit it immediately because you'll forget. Like it's so much easier to do a practice, go home, and spend like 20 minutes being like song, send it off to the band. Because if you wait on it, then you'll be like, what did we do that day? Why did we do this again? What the?
I often think about, in Colorado, there really aren't that many. It's not a culture of session musicians in Denver, but we actually have session musicians. Like you are a session musician. So are a lot of the people that you play with. You integrate in and out of different bands, and like the process that you are developing, and the documentation of these practices. It professionalizes not only your own career but other people's careers as well. Because I think a lot of people have started to do the same thing, and they take the recordings that you've made and learn from them, and then they're able to then jump into other band sets and in a really professional way. So I think your influence is, I see it rippling out.
That's so great.
In a beautiful way.
Yeah, I love that. I think too, when I've had to jump into other people's bands, having had also like someone send a practice over, or even just like to get really specific, especially with things like, I don't know, I'm trying to think about recently, I was like, I just need to hear, like you couldn't hear something very clearly. That's a story that has no end. But I remember like really needing to just, I think there is like a certain element of pride too, like I want to go in and just like knock it out perfectly. And so having those tools is really helpful. And then also recording those practices too, because I think, yeah, you just, if you are involved in a lot of projects, you can just kind of like blur them all together. And then I forget. So it's
you're like, check out this sick bass line I wrote for,
which
this song?
band was that? Yeah. And I love it too. And I think in the writing of things, I do record a lot of like what I work on alone. Because I think I have this like kind of idea that it just true in my own life, it takes about like 4 hours to get to a point where like suddenly you're creating new stuff. But it takes like, you have to like wade through your own stuff and just kind of like mess around. And then at like a 4-hour mark, you like start delving into like different melodies, or something new comes out that I get really excited about. But I'll record that whole thing, and then usually at the end it's like something weird and good starts happening. But it takes that long to get there. So I think there's like, I like to document so that I have, because usually by that point your brain's a little melted. And
does that mean you'll be like, you'll be sitting there with an idea that you have going on for 4 hours?
Usually.
And just
no,
and
I guess
how
it, like,
many LaCroix
goes,
later?
Yeah.
Actually, that's the weird part, is like 4 hours weirdly goes by really quickly. I think there is something very like zen about that. I think I kind of like lose sight of the world, which is really good and healthy, but you so rarely get that opportunity these days that I think even like just silencing your phone, if it's amazing, because I do that now, especially when I came back from the music district, came home to write lyrics, which was a bear of a task with all these new songs, and I would silence my phone during the days, and felt great just knowing that wasn't going to go off, and to be suddenly so aware of how I was just so pinned to that, in this, just even in the awareness of it ringing or dinging with a text message. But then it's also interesting when like people can't get a hold of you, or you don't text them back right away. There's such like a strange culture around this, and it's like, don't you understand who we are? Like we're artists. Like I need to shut this all off. So now I like work really late at night, and I'll work into like late at night, and I think part of it is because no one expects you to respond, which is so weird that's like, I feel that pressure. And often it's like good things like gig offers, or like details on a show, or things that are very relevant, but it's like people get upset. Like you're not allowed to just not, to be undisturbed. It's fascinating.
I think what's really awesome about actually getting to reschedule this interview is that you were at the music district, you were doing some writing, you were doing some pre-production, and about to head into the studio, and you are since back from the studio. And I'm curious because you just released a really beautiful EP, Each After, that felt in a lot of ways like you stepping into more intimate solo territory.
Yeah.
And I wonder how this recording process went, this writing process went, and how that sort of plays into the follow-up from that EP.
That's a really good question. I think I'm kind of right in the thick of that right now, because I loved the way that Each After happened, and it was so personal. Like, it was really, I think, the first time like everything is true on that record pretty much. Like, it's very personal and true. And it was weird to like be singing those songs like at the release show and be like, oh my God, what are you doing? Like you can't
tell people this.
you can't put this out in the world. No, but I think, you know, like of course that's like where any like true thing goes so much further. And that's important. So I think right now it's interesting to have been in this process of super collaborative, which I love musically. And the lyrics are still, I'm like trying to find that same truth and honesty and like dig really deep for these lyrics. But they also are very sonically like, I wanted to write something that was closer to what I was listening to. And I think over the years, like how that project has transformed, because it was very much an emotional outlet from the very beginning. But then, like, you're playing all these shows, and I think, too, starting in New York, and you're, like, playing in all these bars, because that's, like, where you get your first shows, are, like, loud bars or open mics. And so you're just trying so hard to, like, shout to the back of the room, and it's very much like the TVs are on, and everyone else is talking. It's, like, you have to work so hard to get the attention. So I think that influenced the project in a little bit. And even in New York, we became, like, more of a rock band. I think out of necessity to just be heard, like, just to be something that anyone was paying attention to. So I kind of like left that tenderness in a way, or like tried to find a way. I think that's always the challenge of like kind of trying to find where each after is, because that's my heart. That's like so true with something that is a little bit more up. And I guess where that whole story was supposed to land is that I wanted to write something that I was going to enjoy playing. And I think a lot of those tender songs, which I do enjoy playing, are very specific for like a very specific listening atmosphere. And I've been really enjoying having these like full band rock shows where you just like, I get to like go and jam with Jake and like, you know, laugh, and it's like very up. And then I also get to do these much more intimate shows where people are really paying attention. And that's, I love that I can do both of that, but then trying to figure out how to blend those two for this record specifically. I think I'm like right in the thick of figuring out how to write a record that sounds like something I would want to listen to and would really enjoy playing in like kind of a more like driving way. Like I want it to be propulsive and
but
exciting.
Also tender.
But also tender. And so like trying to find these lyrics that, so I'm like digging so hard, and it's been a little painful, which is interesting to, I realized about my like little journaling method that all of these ideas are stacked next to all these crazy things that have happened over the last 5 years or whatever. I have like a stack on my table, and I'm going through, and as I'm looking at like, oh, I like that line, or like, oh, that was a good idea, we should unpack that more, like, oh, we didn't use that chorus there, maybe I'll try it here. It's also right next to like breakups and like, you know, all the things that happen in your adult life. And so it was kind of a weird thing to suddenly be faced with my own writing about my own life at the same time of like trying to write new things. So that was powerful, but also a reminder that like that is where I should start lyrically for this. It should be a little painful and tender and true. And I think coming from each after and that process, that did feel very like I'm glad that I could do that in that way, and now trying to like fold that over into something that is a little bit more sonically full banded. And yeah, so I'm trying to figure that out. It's a good,
you know, one of the things
challenge.
I've always really loved about Still Tide though is that you do have this tenderness even while being a full-on rock band at times. So it does seem like purely as a fan, like a natural thing that you already do.
That's really great to hear. Good. I think that really is good to hear, because I think like all the songs that touch me have that element of tenderness in them. But I also want to like a little beat to it. I want a little kick.
Stick it to them.
What are you listening to? You talked about kind of bringing that around to stuff that you've been really excited to listen to.
Well, it's so funny because we were like, you know, had a bunch of, in part of our pre-production, we're like throwing around reference tracks. Like, I really love the way the drums sound on this one, but I love the guitar treatment on this. And like, I love how dry the vocals are on this one, or the double vocal, and like trying to just kind of get a whole palette of sounds that we could reference and pull from. So we have like a playlist that we're sharing and dumping a bunch of stuff in there. So it's interesting now I have like an idea of that, of that stuff, but I really like Jason and got into her whole world of stuff. We listened to the War on Drugs records because their last record was really beautifully produced and has a bunch of cool guitar stuff and also great drum sounds.
Do you know who produced it?
I don't. I should look at that. Okay. Do you?
No.
Oh. That's a great
I was
question.
hoping you would.
I know. Those are details I should know.
Just kidding.
And then actually went back and listened. Now, currently, I'm listening to a lot of Broken Social Scene, like going backwards
Interesting.
into that. Because I feel like, And then that made me go back through Feist. And it's funny how you start kind of like, in the way that when I was in college, would like discover bands through MySpace by like what they would post as their like top friends and be like, oh, what's this band? And then you just find new music that way. Blew my tiny little college mind at the time. But I think doing that with this record and trying to find reference tracks. But yeah, War on Drugs, Jason I liked, and then went Always, however you say it, got into that. And it was interesting to like pull it apart and see like what you did like about it. A Big Thief, of course, love them. Duh. Who else is on that list? Oh God, I feel like there was another, like, Alabama Shakes and of course like these are all, I guess these are more pointed too towards like production styles and sounds and tones. So very
Awesome.
like purposeful listening. But I'm trying to think about the last time I just put a record on and was like, love this. Oh, Cigarettes After Sex.
Yeah.
That was the last one that I was like,
Great band.
I'll put on that whole record.
So you're in an interesting position because you play in a band with Joe and Nate. Joe Richmond on drums, Nate Meese on bass, but they're also your management team. And that's a relatively new situation. What is it like working with a management team, with them as managers, and how do you think that's helped your career so far?
It's been amazing. I think when we've talked about this privately a lot, actually all of us have, about like trying to manage all the pieces of being a musician and how overwhelming it is. And it's like you're very much this creative being and a writer and a musician, and then are kind of having to be forced into like being a small business owner and a social media pro. And it's like such a beastly thing to contain, especially if you really swing so far into the world of being a creative that like doesn't mean you're necessarily really great at Instagram or at booking shows or all these other elements that you're really forced into doing if you need to get anywhere. So I think with having management, and they're wonderful, and I think that they know me so well and that I know them so well, it's been very easy to communicate clearly about what I want and what I don't want. Because I think when I was younger, like, I had certain people step on or kind of in the way of like, let's help you out, but they didn't really get who I was. And someone like, no ill intended, but like was like, we'll help you with your Twitter stuff or something. This was like 10 years ago, like when Twitter was just beginning. And they took over the account and then were like actively like doing the Twitter thing, but they were unaware that they were like people that I knew, or like that. So it seemed like it was so weird, and shut that down immediately. But I was like, no, you like, why would you do that? And like, you have to ask me to do that. And like, so that was really confusing.
So do you try to what parts of your career do you maintain control of, as far as like the voice? Do you still maintain control of social media?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, to my own, it's a lot of work, but I think you can really tell when a management team or company is behind posts. And I think sometimes that's just the nature of it. If you're really busy, of course, like your management team is going to have to be like, hey, I'm playing a show here, because you're on the road doing your own life. But I really do try to do my own stuff, especially Instagram, because I feel like that is a very direct line to anything. So I think people can really tell when it's like an intern behind a desk being like, I'm really excited to play this show today at 7 p.m. Tickets are $10. That sounds horrible, but I also I think people feel that, and sometimes you can't get away from it. If you are really successful and busy, you do need those people. But I think because I am not that yet, I don't know, I think that doing that myself is very important. And I think the whole essence of everything that is important to me is really about connection. I mean, probably for all of us more than I think anyone, than we vocalize as often as we probably want to. But like, if I don't feel like I've connected with anyone at a show, through the show, or even around the show, then I feel like rotten. I'm like, well, what did we just do? What am I doing this for? So like, I think that goes out to social media too. If I don't feel like there's connection there, then it's like, it feels so hollow, and I just feel gross about it. Even in the posts of like, in trying to convey information in the genuine, like, authentic way that you want to convey that is such a challenge. And sometimes I spend so much time on those stupid Instagram posts because I'm so stubborn about it. But I think it is important, but it also isn't. I don't know. But that baseline connection is, I think, trying to chase that is hard sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if you're like, if you don't feel that at a show and you've just spent like hours and hours trying to make this one moment and it didn't go the way that you wanted it to, or you just don't feel anything. It's like, what am I doing this for? So, but that's like the roller coaster that we all ride of like self-doubt and feeling good and feeling bad and
Why?
and,
Because
yeah.
sometimes you get the answer why pretty organically.
Yeah.
Good show.
Oh man, the best feeling.
You know what I'd like to know? So you are here doing pre-production on this album. What are the specific plans you have for the album and the timeline you have?
Ooh, that's a good, super relevant question. And that kind of touches back on the management thing. I think having a team of people to just even like make that plan with, just even having like a bandmate almost, like just someone to talk through the details and make you feel less alone, or like you don't have that entire burden and project on your shoulders is a big deal. So having Nate and Joe in this management role, just even like very logistically helping with those details and being so organized as they are is huge. Just even for like peace of mind to know that the thing we're making and spending all this time on won't just like be one bright spark in the world and then over. So our plan for that, we spent all last week in the studio, which was great. Total marathon. And then because of our lives are just like all tours and weird and trying to find time together is so hard. So we have more work to do of like recording vocals, recording Jake's guitar, recording the rest of my guitars, and then all the fun stuff like synths and whatever other weird things we're going to do. Guest stars. Aaron on trumpet.
On claps.
Yes, and claps, hand claps. So we do that. I think very realistically it's going to go through October just because I'm going to be going so much with tech work, which is again like that negotiation of tours and taking those tours versus not. And so I think we'll finish up in October, and then hopefully we're looking at a spring release.
Awesome.
Trying to make all those pieces fit in a very like you need this perfect little runway to release it. If you're trying to, you have to give it this whole patch of time to, by the time you're actually releasing it, it's probably been out.
Release the music video and then your singles and properly market it.
Yeah, which is this whole other world of like, I get exhausted thinking about it just because I think too, and I've realized this about myself, or I'm sure we all do that, like when you don't think you're good at a thing, how much more difficult it becomes just because you're so not excited about failing or just doing a poor job, especially if you're on a level already and work in other ways, then to like feel like you're starting over is just kind of like hurts a little bit.
I feel that way every time I try to put on makeup. Oh, girl! I know. I'm like, I'm not any good at this.
You don't even need it.
You mentioned connection, but I'm curious. You've had a long career. I think a lot of people would look at you and be like, Anna is just making it and doing so many amazing things. I'm like a huge fan of yours, and I really deeply respect everything that you do. But I'm curious, what is the thing that drives you? Like, what is the thing that keeps you making art, keeps you, even when your journal says you're too old for this.
5 years ago.
5 years
God,
ago.
So sassy. 29. Dude. It's a good question because I think, very honestly, that little seed or that little thing, whatever it is, can show up some days and be bright and shiny, and I'm like, I got it. And then other days it's just gone, and I'm like, what? Why am I doing this? If this hurts so much, why are you doing it? But I think too, and like over the last, I guess, like decade of, being, doing this in some relative way, I think I just have something I have to. It's such a weird, it seems so flimsy sometimes, especially when you're like full of creative self-doubt, like that does not stand up sometimes to your like little boxer mean self being like, you can't do it, meow, meow, meow. So I think I really do, and I kept saying too, not to put any more pressure on this full length, but I think in like my, marathon of this career, and I very much try to continually look at it all as a marathon. I think when you're caught up in like thinking that everyone else is sprinting ahead, you can get very, you can lose sight. But it is a marathon, like we're all just, it's a long game, which kind of gives me this like peace that, you're working your way up towards your best work, hopefully, or it's a long, long time. But I think, of all the like, my life goals, I do so badly just want like to make a full-length record that I love and care about and that I'm really proud of. And I think like after that, I keep kind of joking, like after that I could just die happy. I'll be so happy if I could just do this one thing. But I think
that I have to will still be in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I think I just have to do it. And I think if I didn't, I would really resent. I think I would become a very bitter, sad person if I didn't see this through, whatever this little feeling is, because it's never gone away. And I think for a while, like when I moved to New York, and it was so hard, like all the rigors of what we do here are hard enough, but in New York it was even so much more of a struggle that I think I really like came out of New York running and screaming because I couldn't find space or time to do that thing that was so crucial to me. So I think that was like, it's funny to look back and you can like think back and be like, wow, New York, that was such a great time. And it was on so many levels, but it was also like, I was having the hardest time ever just because I couldn't breathe, which is an interesting thing to learn about yourself, that, you're living in one of the brightest cities in the world and you're like miserable.
You need space.
And time. And if like it takes 4 hours to get to where you're feeling like you're creating something new, like how do you get 4 hours in New York of playing? Like I lived in shoe boxes, like on top of people, like there's no way. Anyway, so
it's like in a shoebox, inside another shoebox, inside a really big shoebox.
Yeah, like
next
very
to
legitimately
millions of shoeboxes.
Yeah, there's a lot of shoeboxes.
I honestly think that feeling like I just have to is probably the most legitimate reason anybody could ever give. If you think about like sleep, what is sleep? I don't know, but I have to do it. And
Ooh, I like
there
that.
could be scientific explanation about what happens when you sleep, but why do humans have to sleep? How is that any more valid than I have to make this music?
That like got me. I felt that right in my little.
I know. I'm not even stoned right here.
What?
I know.
I doubt it.
I just came up with that on my own, you guys.
Have you read Letters to a Young Poet?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Real good.
Yeah, totally. I love that.
Yeah.
And basically like his second letter or something, he's basically like, put this down for a week and determine whether you must write.
Oof,
and
God.
And I can definitely relate to that feeling so much. As frustrated as I get sometimes, it's just like, it's something that just like crawls back up and it's like, no, you'll never stop. You'll never quit this.
Which is so powerful, but sometimes you're just like, oh, you're still there, huh? All right. Okay. Here we go.
I think there's maybe some peace in knowing that you're going to do it anyway, that you're always going to do it. And, maybe like relinquishing that taking that pressure off yourself to like, produce it right now or give it up or something.
That's, yeah.
You're always going to do it. You're always going to make stuff.
Which it took me a long time to figure out. And it's funny because going back through these journals, I had just reread this passage where it was like, why are you still deciding to do this thing that you've already chosen to do?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and has been evidenced in the last like 7 years of your life, but it was still all these conversations like, what are you doing? Like, are you good enough? Like, is this good enough? Are you, like, all of those things that we go through. And I think that is like a landing spot for all my private worries and self-doubt. That's where that all goes in that journal. But it was so weird to read this in capital letters, like, why are you still choosing or thinking that you need to decide about doing this? You're already doing it.
You are doing this.
Which was so weird to read, but it was exactly that thing, like, why can't I just, like, take that decision off and be like, right, it's already happening. Like, enjoy it. Enjoy the decision that you've made actively for the last 7 years.
And I think that's part of the weirdness of the race, kind of, and the difference between like being a musician or being an artist and having to be like this person who manages everything that you do and constantly creates interesting content and creates with your connects with your fan base all the time, and has to be this person that's constantly arriving at some kind of standard that we have set. And I don't know, I think it creates a lot of weird instability between, you know, confusing what you're doing and what you're making with, like,
oh my God,
how it's
the industry and how it's received.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think also, like, if, you know, I think too about how many people do message me, and at some point you can't keep up, and that's not a humble brag. But like, people will say nice things or will ask me questions, and I feel terrible not being able to respond, but it's like that weird thing where, like, because you are expected to, I get like really anxious about it because I feel terrible. I'm like, if I was like a young teenager reaching out to someone and they didn't write me back, I would like be privately crushed, and I don't want to do that to anyone else. But at some point there's like that breaking point, and I think like trying to forgive myself for all the messages that I can't reply to. But that again is like that.
I'm available for hire.
Could you be my voice?
We could craft another auto response.
Yeah, I'm thinking
that'd
auto
be
response
awesome.
again. I care about you
Absolutely.
deeply.
This is Aaron actually speaking for Anna, because Anna feels so guilty about not responding to this message that she couldn't even generate this auto message, this auto response.
This auto response is brought to you by the Music District.
That would be great.
So you are such an active musician. You have a very multifaceted career in music, careers in music, and you were able to come to the Music District and do a residency for a week. And, you know, I've gotten so much out of having conversations with you in terms of, like, ideas and suggestions, things that you think could happen here.
At the Music District?
At the Music District, yes.
Oh, man. I mean, that week was such a gift. It's hard to, I'm, like, trying to think about what else I would have wanted from that time, because it was so impactful. I mean, that we came away with as much as we did. And just, I think part of that experience too is just the way that we were treated here, as it was very special, and like, this is your time to do this thing. This is a moment. And everyone in this, you guys, very included, facilitated that feeling, which helped us, I think, do that work, which I should say, first of all, was a big deal, just to be, I think too, as musicians, like, you're not always cared for and treated so much as an artist as you are just
A commodity.
or just not seen, I think, in the expectations like we talked about that you do have for all the other small business and industry stuff. But like, yeah, everyone that I love, like, you know, we're all a bunch of weirdos at the end of the day. Like, we're all nerds and dweebs and weirdos, and those are like the special magical people that are making music, and like, you get together and it's so great to like see each other and appreciate that in each other, and then also know what those little magical weirdos need, like space and acknowledgement. And I don't know, I think that alone was just so special, that everyone was like, here's your room, here's your moment, like, and it was just warmth. I don't know, there's something, I think because that is so rarely the feeling sometimes when you're like being hustled around a venue or seen as like, you know, small. That was big. Suggestions, God. I think having the ability to multi-track in there was huge, because then, like, I had all those sessions on my computer and I could just isolate things and figure out and like rewrite different parts on the spot. It was, that alone was such a gift. Suggestions, God.
So in terms of multi-tracking, you were using the Zoom?
No, actually, we brought in all of our own stuff, not realizing that we had the ability, that you guys had the ability to do it here. But we brought in that, and that was great. But so that would have been my suggestion, to be able to multi-track everything. But because you can do that, we just didn't realize that was a big one. I think that pre-production, like I think pre-production also in general is something that people don't know. I think you like grow into understanding what that is as you kind of like make records and fumble your way to making better records, which I think we all do. That's like so much a part of the process. But I wonder too, like making it very clear that like maybe having a very, and Joe and Nate and Jake and I had all talked about this too, of like making it very clear that less about writing sometimes, but I think that was its own special thing, but making it like mapping out what it means, what pre-production is for bands that don't know what that is, I think would help facilitate better recording and better record making. Because I think being able to multi-track, for example, if you are a young band, you're getting like a leg up on the recording process, because now you're not spending like a few $100s in a studio to hear that bass line doesn't work. You get to hear that now and rework it, and then so you can like, having had everything multi-tracked, you can know exactly under the magnifying glass that, you know, working on audio is in that way before you go and spend a few $100s. And I've seen it happen so many times, or been on sessions where you are in a studio and everything is so pressurized because you're, you know, like everyone's poor and you're paying for this precious time, and you know, and things aren't going your way, as they often don't in studios, especially if you're young and green and you haven't had the chance to work on pre-production. And so I guess that's what I mean by pre-production, in the way of like being able to really, you know, look under the microscope at what is working in a song or what isn't, and then going in with that full confidence of like, we're going to track drums and bass together, isolate that, like, you know, you just have this sense of how to do that, which I don't think we knew in the beginning and had to learn the hard way. And thankfully, you know, we did a lot of home recording, but still those were like, you're paying for people's time and energy, and you're so aware, especially when we were doing this in New York, like everyone is on such a schedule and a budget, and it was just like, and then like going in there and being like, oh my God, this bass line doesn't work. What are we going to do? And then you spend the entire day working on this stupid bass line. This is a true story. And then you've wasted a day of tracking that, you know, and your drummer is leaving in 2 days. Like you can't. So I think that alone, pre-production, and maybe, I guess that would be like if there was a way to map that out and be like, this is what pre-production means for some people, and like this is what we found was helpful before, if you're working on a record or working towards a record. That'd be cool.
Anna, thanks so much for coming to be a part of the Musicians Help Desk podcast. It was an incredible pleasure to have you here, not only for the residents, but you came back to talk to us, and we really appreciate that as well. And we can't wait to hear the album that comes out next spring.
Me too. I'm so curious to see what's going to happen. But thanks so much for having me. This is so important what you guys are doing, and I love it. And I'm so grateful I got to be a part of it.
Aww.
Let's hang out.
Okay, let's
hang out.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Peace.
This has been another edition of the Musicians Help Desk podcast. If you enjoy what we're doing, please subscribe. You can check out previous episodes at www.themusicdistrict.org, as well as find out more information about the Music District and all the exciting upcoming events we have going on here in Fort Collins. I'm your host, Alicia. I'll be back next week with artists Ellie Perry, Corey Spangler, and Mark Austin, talking about their Fort Collins Artist Collective launch for Native Stranger. Thanks for tuning in.
Through my hands, night after night, trying to find a flame to keep me warm, close enough for